Good Monday. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we? Welcome to the MCJ Report number 41. I hope that everyone can hear me okay. And I hope that everybody had a nice weekend. Today is May 3rd. I hope that you guys have a good connection there at home. It looks like my software is playing up a little bit. It's showing that nobody is tuned in. That's right. That's what it's coming up from my end. It's showing nobody tuned in on Facebook, YouTube, or Rumble. But my chat feature is working, so I can see that there are some of you tuned in on Facebook right now. So I'd like to welcome you to the broadcast. I'm not sure how many of you there are, but you know, this is just one of the things that we have to power through, right? We don't have the budget of Sky News or ABC or Channel 7 here on the MCJ Report. So you know what? We make do with what we have, which is totally fair and reasonable. Anyway, if you've just tuned in, please go ahead and share the broadcast. We have a fair bit of content to get through tonight, so we're going to just get straight to it. Just a couple of things. We had a great weekend. That's right, Monica, myself, Reignite Democracy. We had several meetings in Melbourne, meeting with several volunteer groups who are willing to actually play a role in getting the good information out there. The information that is so often, well, I would say all the time, withheld by the government and the mainstream media. So if the government and the mainstream media, if they're not going to do the right job, if they're not going to do the right thing by providing balanced information, then we have to do that instead. Is that fair enough? Because unfortunately, consumers of the news only receive one side of the story. We see on social media people that offer a different view to the narrative getting shut down. We saw Craig Kelly taken off social media. So our solution to that is to go old school, to print off huge amounts of information, and we're getting a lot printed off. We're getting it at cost price, so it's great. And to get that information into as many mailboxes as possible, we also have huge placards. Maybe you've seen them that people have been standing on street corners with. And we had some great meetings and many people getting involved. It's just wonderful to see. We were in Somerville and Ballarat, but there were several other meetings that took place around Melbourne. So if you would like to be part of this campaign, a campaign that I would describe as countering the disinformation campaign of the government, you can head on over to reignitedemocracyaustralia.com.au, sign up your interest, and you can be on the ground and you can be at one of the next meetups. How about that? How good is that? There's Jan there saying Craig Kelly has 9,000 followers on Telegram. And that's true. So if you'd like to stay in touch with Craig Kelly and what he's doing, jump on Telegram and you can follow him there. Because unfortunately, he's been wiped from social media. Now, one could make the argument that Facebook, a foreign entity, is interfering in Australian politics by taking off Australia's most, I would say, popular politician. I'm not sure if there's another social media account that is more popular than Craig Kelly's. If there is, I haven't seen it. It seems that his reach was reaching more people than any other MP. I'm not aware of any disinformation that he shared. I saw a lot of studies, a lot of peer-reviewed studies, but apparently that was not appreciated by Facebook and the tech giant, so that they decided it would be easier to wipe him out. And I say they have interfered with public discourse here in Australia. It's unacceptable. And what we need is legislation similar to a bill being put forward in Florida in the United States to prohibit social media companies from axing politicians. Now, I don't think anyone should be axed. I say if your language is legal, you should be able to post it. Is that fair enough? Obviously, we draw the line at death threats and harassment and things like that. That's not free speech. Those are crimes, okay? But legal talk, as in talk that is legal, not criminal, of any nature, should be allowed, and that's just a simple matter of free speech and a matter of living in a free society. Craig Kelly put it very well on an interview he did with Monica the other day when he said that his getting censored, taken off social media, is the digital equivalent of book burning. And unfortunately, this is a sad sign of the times that we're living in. So anyway, without further ado, let's get to the show because we do have a fair bit to get through. All right, guys, as you know, the You Can Say No segment has become a regular fixture here on the MCJ Report. You know that you can say no, so I hope that you express this to your friends and family around the dinner table, because you see a lot of Australians, they're under the impression that they must say yes, and that's actually not true. You can say no, and nobody has the right, whether it's Daniel Andrews, the government, to coerce you into taking a drug that you didn't ask for, that you don't want, and that you don't need. Okay, that's just a simple matter of human dignity. And here in Australia, we are better than to allow ourselves to be pushed around by a big bully government. So the message is you can say no, and make sure that you send that message to your friends and family. And maybe you'll see some people on some street corners holding some huge placards that state you can say no, or some big banners on overpasses. You can expect to see those as well. Anyway, you can say no, right? So let's get to the corona news. Let's just smash through it, shall we? Here's one of Craig Kelly's favorite people, Dr. Vladimir Zelenko. He's been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. This man has been outspoken, one of the leading outspoken people in the world in regards to alternative COVID remedies. The man's a physician and he lives in the United States. Here's a quote that he said in relation to the blackout on alternative COVID remedies. He said, "I can give you reasons why there's resistance. It's very simple. It's called politics, profit, arrogance, and fear." Isn't that the truth, right? What we see time and time again is we see COVID remedies being blacklisted, being made illegal to be prescribed or rolled out to the general public. What we also know about many of these remedies is that they're out of their period of intellectual property. They're out of their period of patent, meaning these drugs can be mass-produced, generics can be mass-produced in laboratories in huge quantities for a tiny, tiny fractional cost. Now, who might this anger? Whose profits might that get in the way of? Well, of course, you'd have to argue the pharmaceutical corporations, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, BioNTech, etc. The shareholders of these very powerful pharmaceutical corporations, the last thing they want is for a cheap alternative to hit the markets that would undermine the profits and future profits of their shareholders. They don't want that, so they need to do everything in their power to make sure that doesn't happen. So Dr. Vladimir Zelenko, if you don't know him, go and look up his work. He's been outspoken. Craig Kelly's been in touch with him and he's doing a great job, so you can go and look him up. All right, heading over to the United States. West Virginia offering an incentive to get vaccinated. Money. Now, I think we've just about seen everything now. We've seen free donuts from Krispy Kreme. We saw a strip club in the United States giving away memberships for people getting vaccinated. We've seen the Australian government paying pro-vaccine actors $900 a day. The government spending millions of our dollars for pro-vaccine commercials and propaganda. And now we see here a GOP governor, that is the Republicans, by the way, coming up with a plan to give $100 to every young person who gets the shot. Well, if they don't want it, maybe they'll do it for $100. If not, maybe Krispy Kreme will get them over the line. Or if not, then maybe they'll do it because they want access to a sports stadium. The coercion is extreme, and what we've seen is that governments around the world will go to any measures to try and compel and coerce and manipulate their population into doing something they don't want to do. So I'm sure that you can expect to see this type of thing happening in other places. Pfizer-BioNTech seeking the European Union's okay to use COVID-19 vaccine on kids. So it's not enough that they get the general population right. It's not enough that their projected sales are $15 billion for this year. They want to go for an entirely new demographic, which is, of course, children. Now, why would we trust Pfizer and BioNTech when they tell us that this so-called vaccine is safe for children? In fact, we look at adults, we look at the adverse reactions from the Center for Disease Control, their adverse reaction database. We see these events stacking up by the day. People taking the vaccine and shortly after experiencing some type of terrible side effect. Okay, now Pfizer is telling us, well, kids need to take it too. Now, the question we need to be asking ourselves is Pfizer making this recommendation in the best interests of public health for children, or are they making this recommendation in the best interests for their shareholders? That's the question I put forward to you, and that's the question that you should be putting forward to your friends and family around the dinner table who believe that Pfizer can do no wrong. You know, I've got a friend of mine, he told me Pfizer would never hurt us, Morgan. Pfizer would never do us any harm. Well, all you need to do is look into Pfizer's history to understand that this corporation has a huge history of criminal behavior, negligent behavior that has resulted in the suffering of countless amounts of people, and many lives have been lost. I made an entire presentation on Pfizer's corporate rap sheet. Go to mcjreport.com, special presentations, and you can view it there. All right, moving forward here. Pfizer riding high COVID-19 vaccine launch pays CEO Albert Bourla $20 million for 2020. I tell you what, if you think Daniel Andrews is a powerful person, he's nothing compared to this man, Albert Bourla. Albert Bourla is a giant compared to Daniel Andrews, and his political influence is far greater in Australia and all around the world. Look at this guy right here, $21 million a year. Says here, thanks to the success of its COVID-19 vaccine, the drug giant Pfizer has become a household name around the globe, and companies eyeing $15 billion in sales from the shot this year. That's what we said before. For writing that 2020 success story, CEO Albert Bourla collected a pay package worth more than $21 million. This man is laughing all the way to the bank. This man came out recently and said, hey, people are probably going to need 3 shots in the first year of vaccination. Was he making this recommendation based on the best interest of your public health or the best interest of his back pocket? What do you think? Put that in the comments. Now, you got to remember, the CEO of Pfizer, this is a guy that sold $5.6 million of his stock as the company, as you can see here, announced vaccine data that sent the shares soaring. In fact, the share price from Pfizer was almost at an all-time high, and this guy just happened to sell all of his shares. Remember, it happened November last year. Pfizer came out and announced that their vaccine had, 95% efficacy or whatever they said, something like that, 95%. And just coincidentally, Albert Bourla comes and sells his shares, a whole 132,508 shares at an average price of $41.94 per share, almost an all-time high for the share price of Pfizer. Now, it says here the sale was part of a, quote, pre-scheduled trading plan. All right, so it had nothing to do with the announcement. All right, nothing to do with the share price just happening to skyrocket after the announcement, and everything to do with a so-called pre-scheduled trading plan. Do you believe that, or do you believe that is absolute baloney? Put that in the comments below. The article says here, CEO Albert Bourla sold almost $5.6 million worth of stock on Monday. This was from last November, by the way. The same day the drug maker announced positive data on the experimental coronavirus vaccine. Well, at least they reported on this part accurately, yeah? It says here, shares of Pfizer jumped by almost 15% after the company and its partner BioNTech announced the so-called reported efficacy. And so there you go. You make up your own mind about that. Do you smell a rat, ladies and gentlemen? Or is it just a coincidence? Is it just luck of the draw, he got lucky, or did he make a calculated decision? All right, moving over to the Australian, a little bit of different corona news. Swimming Australia is expected to stop athletes from receiving their second dose of the COVID-19 vaccine until after the Olympic trials of June. Now, why might that be? Is it possible that Swimming Australia is showing a lack of confidence in the vaccine? Why would they be saying that? Greg Hunt said that it's safe and it's effective and that it's going to help you and your parents and your grandparents and your nonna. That's what Greg Hunt said. So why would Swimming Australia be doubting Greg Hunt? Can you answer me that question? I don't know the answer. Okay, Greg Hunt paints himself as the savior of Australia. That's what I would argue. Without ever doing any of his own research, he told us these vaccines are great. They're going to save everybody. And you got Swimming Australia here showing what I interpret as hesitation and doubts about whether or not their athletes will be safe. It says here, the sporting body wants to ensure athletes are not hampered by jab side effects in the lead up to Tokyo. Well, that is only fair and that is only reasonable and that is only a matter of common sense. I wonder what Greg Hunt has to say about that. All right, moving forward here. Disability provider denies services to clients who get COVID-19 vaccine over unfounded shedding concerns. All right, now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this. We're going to go through some articles here. What we have seen has been a rise of businesses and service providers who are now saying the opposite of what some other businesses are saying by proclaiming that they do not wish to offer services to people that have taken this vaccine, which from my standpoint, I think that's fair enough. If we have businesses out there looking to stop people from using their services or entering sports stadiums who have not taken this provisionally approved vaccine, then why shouldn't businesses or other services be allowed to do the opposite? Now, I want to just talk a little bit about the language used in this article in the ABC. This is by a guy called Eugene Boisvert, okay? He said these claims are unfounded. So my question to Eugene is, on what basis are you proclaiming these claims to be unfounded? Which professionals have you spoken to? And what type of research have you conducted to make this bold assertion that these claims are unfounded? Did you do any research at all, Eugene from the ABC? My suspicion is that you haven't done any of your own real research and instead you've just proclaimed your opinion as fact. Keep in mind, Eugene, this is your opinion. It does not equate to fact. It says here, Coalition Chairman Rod Pierce was shown an email to a patient's grandson saying his care provider was removing her services to all clients who had received a COVID-19 vaccine because of the, quote, risk of them shedding the virus. Who here has heard about certain people expressing these concerns? Now, I have not, okay, I will tell you, I have not uncovered any information to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that people who get vaccinated are posing some type of risk to other people that they come into contact with. But in saying that, I've seen many complaints arising. In fact, people have been reaching out to me, complaining of experiencing certain feelings of side effects after being in contact with a certain individual who had the vaccine. I don't know what the answer is to this, but considering there are people making this complaint, that is surely worthy of an investigation to get to the bottom of it. Is that fair and reasonable? And it's not like one person. Tell me at home. Have you spoken to anyone who is complaining of side effects after coming into contact with somebody that took the vaccine? Several people have reached out to me. So I think if this is a widely shared concern, it's only fair that it's looked into. Now, it says here, COVID-19 vaccines do not contain the live virus. That may be true, but the general concern I hear from people is not that of a shedding of a live virus, but rather ingredients that could be making them feel not so well or maybe making them feel ill. It says here, the National Disability Insurance Scheme client who has autism received a letter from a social worker, Matilda Bolden, on April 7th, which said she was suspending services to, quote, service providers, clients, friends and families who receive an inoculation. I'm going to read you the letter that was written by Matilda. It says here, dear friends and colleagues, this is a group email to advise that we will be suspending services for a month with any service providers, clients, family and friends who are taking the COVID-19 vaccine. My staff and I will not be exposing ourselves to the risks of shedding as I have family members with autoimmune illnesses and so do many of our clients. I also have a family member who was severely vaccine injured and is at risk of further harm should she contract another infection. The best and most revered scientists predict a massive, quote, super spread of pathogens with the vaccine, and we are taking this risk even more seriously than the original threat of COVID-19. Anyone taking the vaccine is asked to disclose the fact to my clients and other professional staff and refrain from attending any appointments for 4 weeks. Anyone experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 will be asked to leave any scheduled appointments and cancel their services for a month. I have a Rumble account with a wide range of information about the vaccine and COVID-19 stats, and you're welcome to reach your own conclusions about the associated risks. As that said, after a period of quarantine, I welcome resuming work with anyone so affected. So that was coming from Matilda in relation to her concerns. Now, of course, we have the ABC calling these concerns unfounded. I'm not here to tell you that shedding is real, but I'm also not here to tell you that it's not real. What I am saying is that I see many people expressing this concern, and rather than having journalists and writers making assertions such as it's, quote, unfounded, I say it's something that should be looked into and should be debated, as should the merits of lockdown, as should the merits of a PCR test for determining infection. All of these issues must be debated, and that is supposedly the cornerstone of living in a liberal democracy, which I argue we are not anymore, unless we take it back. All right, moving on here to the New York Times. A private school in Miami citing false claims bars vaccinated teachers from contact with students. So again, the New York Times, using similar language to the ABC said unfounded. The New York Times, without providing their own reasoning or research, used the term false claims. And this is a similar scenario, a school in Miami expressing concerns about COVID-19 vaccinated teachers coming into contact with students. Now we move over to Canada. A business bans people vaccinated against COVID-19 from entering. So this is a silver and gold exchange business in Canada, which has also expressed concerns regarding people who have been vaccinated. I'm going to play this clip for you. It goes for 2 minutes. And there's no volume. That would probably help.
An Okanagan business is causing a stir in Kelowna by banning vaccinated people and the wearing of masks.
We'd rather not be exposed to people who've been vaccinated and who could shed the virus.
Sun City Silver and Gold Exchange's owner, Steve Merrill, says the ban on vaccinated people is to protect his clients and himself.
Shedding is real. It's a problem now, and it's going to be a bigger problem as more and more people line up for these experimental vaccines.
Signs outside the store tell patrons no masks are allowed inside, and the same goes for anybody vaccinated. The city says it's working closely with Interior Health to see what action they may take against Sun City Silver and Gold Exchange.
It would appear that he is operating in contravention of current public health orders. So of course the city is not supportive of those sorts of actions or those sorts of attitudes. However, I can also let you know that that business is operating without a current Kelowna business license and has been fined for continuing to operate without a business license.
Authorised officers fining businesses for simply trying to earn money. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I'll do a special presentation on authorised officers. These people, I say, they particularly get under my skin. They could have chosen other jobs to do, but instead they saw this corona situation and said, hey, I can go and make life a living hell for my fellow Australians and potentially shut down their businesses so I can pick up a paycheck. I will make a special presentation on these authorised officers because I think we need to be talking about it. Anyway, I'll get back to the video.
Interior Health says the shedding of the virus is a false narrative that holds no scientific backing when talking about COVID-19 vaccines.
We do have some viruses that are actually in the vaccine we give them. It's actually a live vaccine. So technically, yes, you can shed the virus after you take those vaccines. Luckily, the COVID-19 vaccine is not a live virus vaccine. So it is not possible to shed the virus because of the vaccine.
Sun City Silver and Gold Exchange is the second private business in Kelowna to defy public health orders. Global News reported on an unlicensed gym, Flow Academy, that has similar anti-public health order policies. Interior Health has issued a closure order for that business too. Looking forward, Merrill says he will not be changing his policies and that when the city and Interior Health comes knocking, he'll be ready to fight. Darian Matasafung, Global News.
You got to respect these businesses that stand up to the bully governments. Who here remembers last year there was a hairdresser here in Melbourne and she was located in Carnegie, I want to say, and it was during a lockdown. And her husband decided that they could not keep their doors closed for any longer. And they decided they would open up. And this was the time when we had the bus. Remember the big Daniel Andrews Let Us Out bus? And do you guys remember what happened? This brave couple announced they would be opening their doors because otherwise they were not going to be able to pay their bills. And when they did, several other businesses put their hand up and said, you know what, we're going to open our doors as well. And then the next day, Daniel Andrews eased the restrictions. So it just goes to show what a little bit of public pressure can do at times. Who here remembers that? Anyway, moving forward, Reuters, fact check, COVID vaccines do not shed from one person to another and then cause reproductive problems. Okay, so they've used the term do not. Now, one thing that makes me particularly suspicious is when I see several mainstream media organizations all releasing articles at the same time trying to disprove a widely shared concern. That's what makes me pay attention, ladies and gentlemen. I say, all right, they've all come together to proclaim that all these people making these concerns are crazy, but what measures did they take? So we've seen a few terms used now. It's interesting to take note. Unfounded, false claims, and do not, okay, from one person to another and then cause reproductive problems. Now, this has actually been a concern expressed. I've seen many people expressing these concerns about potential reproductive issues and disruption to menstrual cycles. Okay, again, I'm not saying that there is any evidence to suggest these claims. I'm just simply stating that several people are making these complaints and raising these concerns, and it's therefore worthy that we listen to these concerns and talk about them. Okay, here we go. Does not, again, COVID-19 does not make people dangerous to others. We see the mainstream media coming out in force saying, no, don't you even think about not taking this vaccine. We wouldn't want to anger the shareholders of Pfizer. Hey, they're expected to profit billions of dollars. Who are you to get in their way, measly civilian? Here we go, New York Times. No, other people's COVID vaccines can't disrupt your menstrual cycle. Now, even the New York Times has been forced to address this particular issue. They're trying to disprove this issue, but the fact that they've actually addressed it in one of their articles tells you, without a doubt, that it's not just one person out there making this type of complaint. It has to be many, many people. Okay, if it was only one or two people complaining about a disruption to their menstrual cycle, the New York Times would never cover it. It wouldn't be a big enough story. Okay, think about it, ladies and gentlemen. It says here, in recent weeks, people who oppose COVID vaccinations well, they don't know for sure they oppose them. I mean, do we really oppose COVID vaccinations? We just think it should be a fair choice. Look at the language the mainstream media uses. It's really, once you start understanding the language, you sort of see through their manipulation. Is that fair enough? Anyway, in recent weeks, people who oppose COVID vaccinations have spread a claim that is not only false, so there you go, making a bold assertion, it's false. We haven't done our own research. We haven't consulted both sides of, both experts from both sides of the arguments. We're just going to say that it's false, but defies the rules of biology. Okay, so they've determined it defies biology, that being near someone who's received a vaccine can disrupt a woman's menstrual cycle or cause a miscarriage. All right, so that's what the New York Times is saying. Okay, the latest anti-vax myth. There you go, labeling it a myth. That's what they do. Anybody that raises concerns about this vaccine, they're put in the crazy basket. They're called a conspiracy theorist, an anti-vaxxer. They're called dangerous, selfish. They're not thinking about their grandparents, and they're just a mythical anti-vax monster that wants to hurt society. So we see the term here, anti-vax, used by MedPage Today. All right, but here's actually an article which is a little bit less crude, still coming from the same position as the mainstream media, whether it was the New York Times or ABC. But what we have here is Nebraska Medicine, and this is from the state of Nebraska in the United States, who are actually being more respectful in their approach to addressing this concern. I'm going to show you this article. It says here, the COVID-19 vaccines, irregular periods, and spike protein shedding. Okay, so notice in the title straight away, they're not calling people crazy. They're not implying that these claims are unfounded. They're not claiming that these claims are some type of anti-vax myth. They're simply stating the concern, COVID-19 vaccines, irregular periods, and spike protein shedding. And this is coming from Nebraska Medicine, MCJReport.com. Go there, put your email address in, and I'll send you each and every one of these articles so you can read through it a bit more thoroughly in your own time. I'm going to read to you from this article. It says, right now, There's no scientific evidence that suggests COVID-19 vaccines are making periods irregular. Okay, so you look at the language they use right now. So they're leaving the door open. Right now, there's no evidence, but they're leaving the door open for maybe down the track there will be. They're covering themselves, unlike the New York Times and the ABC saying unfounded claims, no evidence, that's it, end of story. It's an anti-vax myth. Okay, so at least they've used the term right now. It says here, quote, some women have reported on social media that the period after a COVID-19 vaccine was different or changed in some way from what they usually expect, says Jennifer Griffin, a medical doctor. Says, quote, this was not identified in the clinical trials of the vaccines, which are only scheduled to conclude in 2023, by the way, or according to Greg Hunt, we are the clinical trial and it's ongoing. It says here, there's also no biological mechanism based on how the vaccines work and that would explain the occurrences. Okay, well, considering the clinical trials are only scheduled to conclude in 2023, I mean, we've got mRNA technology being used for the first time in vaccines on humans before. I'd say there's still a lot of question marks, right, which is why they only have a provisional approval. Okay, now you got to understand, for newspapers to be covering the complaints of these women, and now also Nebraska Medicine, it really tells you that there is an avalanche of these complaints arising online. Okay, any complaint in a large enough number is worth being looked into and worth being taken seriously. Is that fair enough? It says here, they could be related as in abnormal periods, but it's too soon to say for sure. Okay, so at least they're leaving the door open. Too soon to say for sure. Maybe down the track we'll have more information and maybe we will readjust our position, which to me is fair and reasonable language, because as far as I'm aware, there is no conclusive information to prove a relationship in some sort of menstrual cycle disruption and the COVID vaccine or somebody that took the COVID vaccine that was near somebody, okay? I'm trying to be measured here. It says here, can vaccine shedding cause side effects in unvaccinated people? It says here, we have no data to indicate that contact with somebody who's been vaccinated affects menstrual cycles, says infectious disease expert James Lawler. Okay, so we have no data to indicate. Okay, that's a reasonable statement. I'd say it's probably an honest statement. He doesn't have any data to indicate it. But in saying that, the language is still a lot more fair. Right now, we don't have data. Maybe there will be data in a week or 2 weeks or in a month or in 2 months. Okay, so a much more respectful approach to the concerns raised by many women coming from Nebraska Medicine. That is nebraskamed.com. Again, mcjreport.com. I'll send this out to you. Now moving on to science. I said silence. Of course, the government and the mainstream media and the vaccine companies would like to silence many people, right? We're going to keep on going for as long as we can. I'm going to stay on Facebook and YouTube for as long as I can. These platforms are so important. I tell people that I love Telegram and Rumble, but it's also a little bit of a haven for the converted. You know what I mean? The fence sitters and the casual observers, most of them are not on Rumble. They're on the mainstream social media platforms, which is why I want to stay on here for as long as I can. And anyway, Science Daily, it says here, oral drug blocks SARS-CoV-2 transmission, research is fine. This is coming from December 3rd last year from Georgia State University. It says here, the summary, treatment of SARS-CoV-2 infection with a new antiviral drug, MK4482, completely suppresses virus transmission within 24 hours, researchers have disclosed. MCJReport.com, put your email address in, I'll send it to you. All right, so this was from last December, and then there was another study conducted on the same drug, MK4482, a hamster study, again from Science Daily, experimental antiviral for COVID-19 effective in hamster study. It says here, MK4482 significantly decreases levels of virus and disease damage in the lungs of hamsters treated for SARS-CoV-2 infection, according to a new study from the National Institute of Health Scientists. SARS-CoV-2 is the virus that causes COVID-19. We know that, right? Delivered orally, and it's now in human trials. You won't see DHHS talking about it. You won't see Brett Sutton talking about it. You won't see Daniel Andrews. And you sure as hell won't see Pfizer, Albert Bourla, Scott Morrison, Greg Hunt. They won't talk about it because they just want you to shut your mouth, stick something in your arm, don't ask any questions, and be about your day and do it for your grandparents and do it for your nonna, right? In the words of Greg Hunt. Anyway, moving forward here, we see some absolute insanity from Cambodia. But these scenes have been pretty normal, unfortunately, throughout a lot of Asian countries and moving over towards Western Asia as well. As infections surge, that's what they're saying, all right? This is ABC. People in lockdown go hungry, all right? So they're turning out positive PCR tests. You guys know the drill with PCR tests. And the Cambodian authorities are not allowing people to leave their homes, even for the purpose of buying food. They're saying, no, it's too dangerous. You got to stay at home, even if you starve. Says here, tens of thousands of people under lockdown are running out of food. People are not allowed to go out to buy food or other basic necessities. But hey, it's for their best interest, all right? It's for the overall good of society. Don't question it. If you do, we'll label you a conspiracy theorist and an anti-vaxxer. Says here, many of those who have broken the rules have been beaten with canes or arrested. Police have defended their actions and said they needed to do it to save lives. We needed to beat Johnny in the street to save lives. Look at this. Cambodia police defend caning of lockdown offenders for breaching COVID-19 rules. Well, Victoria police are no better, right? Do you remember what Victoria police did to people defying lockdown rules? I think you remember the public order response team using excessive force. I have a friend of mine, he ended up in hospital in a very bad way after being totally assaulted by the public order response. I've had my run-ins, of course, with public order response, and it's not a very pleasant experience. These guys basically assault people and they violate our civil liberties. So the Cambodia police they're hitting people with canes. So of course it seems obscure, but we've seen violence from police right here in Victoria as well, right? It says here, a police spokesman said the caning and arrests were in order to save lives. We beat that guy with a cane to save the life of his neighbor, right? So, and here in Cambodia, a bit of politics, the Interior Ministry urging police to end the violent enforcement of corona lockdowns. So there's the police, and there's their weapon of choice, a cane or some sort of wooden stick that they drive around beating people with. Now, it was actually pretty hard to find some footage of these beatings. I'm going to show some to you. The quality is pretty poor, but I'm going to show it to you nonetheless. Yeah, definitely obscure and a different approach to Victoria Police with the public order response team sending 5-6 guys to get people in headlocks and twist their arms backwards, etc. The Cambodia police just cruising around on motorbikes, beating people with canes. So more unfair treatment towards the public from the police, just in a different form, using canes to whack people. So moving on to Germany, quote, has to be taken seriously. Police investigate a death list of German members of parliament after a vote on a lockdown law. Okay, I guess similar to a vote to extend the state of emergency. Says here, a document titled The Death List of German Politicians has surfaced on social media. The German criminal police confirmed the list contained the results of the Bundestag's voting on the Infection Protection Act passed on April 21st. It also included the names of individual MPs who supported the bill, according to German media. Rightio, so we have some German civilians angry, actually putting together a, quote, death list of MPs who voted to extend the lockdowns. Moving over to Western Australia, we see a man charged with threatening to kill the Western Australia Premier Mark McGowan. 33-year-old man has been charged with threatening to kill West Australian Premier Mark McGowan. Now, in the article here, it doesn't say anything in relation to the corona restrictions, so we don't know what the motivation was behind the man that made this threat. All we have is conjecture. Moving on here, back to the United States. The CDC blames, quote, COVID anxiety for adverse reactions, okay? So they're saying People are not getting adverse reactions because of an ingredient of the vaccine. They're getting adverse reactions because they're anxious. What do you think, ladies and gentlemen? It says here for adverse reactions, 164 times more people fainting after getting Johnson & Johnson vaccine compared to the flu shot. So these people fainting, are they just simply anxious, or is it something else? They don't seem to faint after the flu shot, yet they faint after the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Why might that be? It says here the CDC has blamed it on, quote, COVID anxiety. It's an interesting concept, isn't it? It says here, anxiety has caused adverse reactions to Johnson & Johnson jab in 64 patients. Another bold assertion, anxiety has caused it. In just 3 days, promoting a temporary shutdown of 4 vaccination sites in the US. Oh, okay, it goes on to say, said a report by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Interesting. The CDC pointed out that during the 5 weeks that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has been in use in the US, reports of people fainting were 164 times more frequent compared to the influenza jabs, at a rate of 8.2 and 0.05 cases per 100,000 shots respectively. And they said it might be caused by anxiety about receiving an injection. So here they say might be caused, but if we go up, they say anxiety has caused. Has caused and might have caused, two very different things. So which one is it? What do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Is it just people are anxious, so they're passing out? Or do you think it's more likely they're passing out due to the ingredients? Again, I don't have the answer. You can make up your own mind. All right, that is the end of the You Can Say No section of the show. Moving forward to some Canadian news. Canadians doing a great job pushing back against the injustice and standing up for what's right. I hope that on Friday, I hope that many of you caught my discussion with the Canadian frontline nurses, such great people, upholding their commitment to serve in the best interest of public health and doing everything they can. Great people, and I hope that we can have them back soon. But we're going to talk about something a little bit different from Canada. As you can see here, protest against COVID-19 measures in Montreal ends with tear gas and arrests due to, quote, more aggressive smaller groups. Now, we see this sort of defamatory language used by the mainstream media time and time again for the purpose of delegitimizing protesters who are against the corona measures. So the Montreal Gazette has labeled a small group of, quote, that they're, quote, more aggressive. But the real question we need to be asking is, was it the protesters that were aggressive, or was it the police enforcing heavy-handed tactics that were aggressive towards the protesters? What do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Now, I've been to a lot of rallies, okay, here in Melbourne, and I can tell you, I've seen physical altercations, but they've always been initiated by the police against the civilians. I've never seen one physical tussle at an anti-COVID measures restrictions rally that was initiated by civilians. It has always been the police initiating the violence, and I can tell you that hand on heart. All right, so it looks like they did a great job. Now, as we see here, the Montreal Gazette is actually downplaying the protest. I read reports of tens of thousands of people attending, but according to the Montreal Gazette, they just call it a protest. Now, I looked for some more fair reporting. I saw France24.com that said thousands march in Montreal against virus restrictions. And then it goes into a bit more detail and says tens of thousands of protesters. Wouldn't that be nice in Australia? Tens of thousands. March Saturday at Montreal's Olympic Stadium, rallying against restrictions imposed by the government to stem a third wave of the coronavirus pandemic. All right, we've heard that sort of language before. Police refused to provide a crowd estimate. Now, why would they refuse to provide a crowd estimate? I'll tell you why. If the media was to report honestly on anti-corona protests, what they would be doing is essentially demonstrating to the public the extent to which many people, tens of thousands of people, have a problem with a certain issue. What protests are is a demonstration of social proof that a large number of people in society are unhappy with some type of policy or something that the government is doing, okay? So by downplaying the number of attendees in a protest, the mainstream media seeks to undermine the gravity of our movement. They seek to undermine the popularity of our concerns. What sounds more impressive to you at home? 50,000 Australians protested against Daniel Andrews on Saturday, or a couple of hundred anti-Labor protesters held signs out the front of Parliament House. Of course, 50,000 people sounds more impressive, but it also sends a much more important message, which is the message of social proof that 50,000 people cared enough to get off their couch and to hit the streets. Okay? So the media and the government, they're trying to undermine the concerns of many. That's why you see underreporting in relation to attendee numbers at protests by the mainstream media. Now it says here, police refused to provide a crowd estimate. I wonder why they refused, right? But Canadian media said the turnout was about 30,000, making it the largest rally against COVID restrictions in Quebec. So that makes me think if the Canadian media was reporting 30,000, maybe it was more like 100,000. I don't know. I wasn't there. But what I do know is that at our protest last March in Melbourne, the Worldwide Rally for Freedom, the mainstream media reported hundreds of people. But actually, there were several thousands of people. Says here, protesters, mostly unmasked and ignoring social distancing rules, said restrictions imposed by the Quebec government were, quote, unjustified. Unjustified, disproportionate, and all of the above. I wish my Canadian friends the best of luck in their fight against injustice. All right, so what we have here is some footage from the actual protest. Okay, I'm going to play you some footage. I have it here, so here you go. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Great to see our Canadian friends standing up for their freedoms and pushing back against injustice. If you're from Canada, if you're watching the show, good stuff. Keep it up, keep fighting, and we will do the same here in Australia. Alrighty, what do we have next? Who here recognizes this flag? This is the state flag of Florida from the United States. Now, why do I have a Floridian flag here? Because the governor and his government have actually been putting through some interesting legislation, much of it which I would describe as being in favor of the people and in favor of individuals' rights to personal freedom and liberty. I'm going to go through some of the legislation that has been recently implemented and introduced in Florida, because I dare say that some of our politicians should take some inspiration in relation to what the local government in Florida is doing. So I'm going to take you through some articles right now. Florida is actually looking like a pretty decent place to live if you're in the United States. Alrighty, so Florida approves transgender athlete sports ban. Let me tell you what this means. The Florida Legislature this week approved a measure that requires athletic sports teams designated for girls to only be open to biological female athletes. Who here agrees with that? Who here considers that to be common sense, that biological females should compete against other biological females? Who here agrees that that is common sense and that is equality and that is just a simple matter of providing an even playing field? No pun intended. It says here, the language of the provision means that transgender female athletes who were biologically male at birth can only participate in sports designated for males. It applies to high school and college sports sponsored by public schools. The bill now heads to Governor Ron DeSantis' desk for signature. All right, so that's Florida. Alabama has done something similar. Alabama bans biological males from playing on female school sports teams. What we've actually seen over the past few years has been biological males who have decided they identify as females competing in female sporting divisions. We saw it in Australia in weightlifting. We've seen it in the United States a lot with all different types of sports. And of course, these individuals have an unfair advantage. Now, I'm not here to tell anyone what they should or should not identify as what somebody does in their personal life. It's really none of my business. But when it comes to providing a fair environment, especially for athletes, you have to match apples with apples. Is that fair enough, or am I out of line? You tell me that there at home. The divisions for males and females exist for a reason, and it's in order to uphold equality and a level playing field in order for athletes to compete in a fair environment. That's why we have those divisions. Okay? If you see it differently, feel free to leave your comments in the comment section. And here we go, Caitlyn Jenner, a transgender individual, stating it just isn't fair. Caitlyn Jenner opposes biological boys competing in girls' sports. So this is Caitlyn Jenner, a transgender person who agrees with the legislation that biological boys should compete against biological boys, etc. Okay, so clearly Caitlyn Jenner not expressing an issue there. Moving on to some other interesting Floridian legislation. Florida passes bill prohibiting social media giants from deplatforming politicians. Now, in my opinion, nobody that is engaging in speech that is not illegal, as in illegal speech would be considered death threats, harassment, bullying, things like that, like extreme bullying. Florida passes bill prohibiting social media giants deplatforming politicians. Okay, so first of all, obviously, we believe in free speech, and we don't believe that anyone should be deplatformed if they are not breaking the law. Okay, is that fair enough? But especially politicians. Having politicians deplatformed is particularly problematic, regardless of what their views are, regardless of whether you agree with them or not. It's for the reason that we need to know what is in the minds of these people. If we're electing these people and if they're on our money, we deserve to know what their views are, okay? Now, there are certain politicians out there that I disagree with on almost every single level, but I support their right to be on social media, mostly for the reason that we need to know what we're up against. For example, you look at Raf Ciccone, the senator that was never voted in by the people, by the way, that was just there to fill a vacant position. I would never want Ciccone to be taken off social media because I want to know what this man is thinking, and by knowing what he's thinking, I understand the potential threat he could be posing to Australian society. If he was censored and those like him and cast into darkness, then who knows? We could have dangerous people scheming, making plans out of the view of the public, completely behind our backs. That's why I disagree with censorship in relation to politicians being banned. And of course, we see Craig Kelly has been banned. Facebook, a foreign-owned entity, has decided that they are willing to step in and interfere in the political process here in Australia. It's completely unacceptable. It needs to be stopped. And I tell you what, we need to implement measures in our parliament. Now, our current parliament won't do it. That's why you, me, all of us need to do everything we can to get good, decent people voted in next election. And don't worry, I'm going to be talking to you a lot more about that. These are not empty words. There is a plan and there's a lot going on in the background, and I can't wait to talk to you about it. We need people in our parliament that are actually going to push back against the authoritarian, communist-esque tactics of Facebook. As Craig Kelly said, this is the modern-day digital equivalent of book burning. This is the Chinese Communist Party raiding the Epoch Times and smashing up their printing machinery and computers. This is pure evil, ladies and gentlemen. And we've seen it time and time again throughout history. Every authoritarian takeover, whether it was a communist revolution or what have you, begins with censorship, shutting down the opposition, not because they're breaking the law, because they're speaking ideas which could potentially challenge the dictatorial revolution. They don't want that. They don't want that. Now, ideas should be debated, ladies and gentlemen. If an idea is good enough to be rolled out into the public, it should be strong enough to withstand the debate. Facebook has decided they don't agree with that principle, and they're stepping in and they're dictating what you're allowed to think, who can speak and who cannot. This is so dangerous, and it is reminiscent of every authoritarian takeover in history. There's two main things that happen during an authoritarian takeover or an authoritarian revolution. Information is censored and they take your firearms. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. At least one of those has been carried out here in Australia, but we're seeing, of course, the other becoming a bigger and bigger problem every day. You make of that as you will. Put that in the comments, share your thoughts. I think you understand what I'm talking about. Of course, I'm talking about the actions of John Howard during the 90s, and that is something that I am going to get really stuck into on the MCJ report when the time is right. So anyone that's been wondering about that, don't worry, I'm aware of it, and I will address it. Back to the article. It says here, the Florida... Okay, I think we just read that. Okay, no, we didn't. I think we did. I'm going to read it again. I've gone on a little tangent. I can't remember what I read and what I didn't. The Florida Legislature on April 29th passed a bill to prohibit social media platforms with huge user bases from knowingly deplatforming politicians and other Floridians. If a social media company deplatforms a user they know to be a political candidate, they face penalties of up to $250,000 per day for statewide officials and $25,000 a day for a candidate for other offices, the bill states. Sounds like a good bill. We need legislation like that. Is that fair enough? Is that the sort of legislation you need in Australia? Well, then, if it is, it should motivate you come next election to get out of your house and prop up someone good and decent that's running in your area. Okay? You know what? This might be in Florida, but seeing the implementation and the formation of this type of legislation, it makes me excited and it makes me hopeful and it makes me think, if they can do it there, we can do it here. Who here is with me? Who here agrees? It says here, the move comes amid significant criticism from all over the world that social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter, have deplatformed users for merely expressing different political viewpoints. Isn't that true? This is just complete political censorship. All right, more Florida news. Florida passes election bill that would make changes to mail-in voting. Okay, so a lot of the complaints coming from the former president, President Trump, and many other Republicans was in relation to the mail-in voting and the potential for the existence of voter fraud via these mail-in ballots, okay? Not saying there was fraud. I'm saying that several concerns were raised, okay? You can make up your own mind about that. But Florida here expressing concerns and implementing new legislation to address those concerns in relation to mail-in voting. So Florida there looking to what I interpret as implementing measures to secure the electoral process. Again, Florida House passes bill to permanently ban COVID-19 vaccine passports. God bless them. All right, so Florida to forego vaccine passport requirements. Just going to read to you here. Okay, this is coming from the governor. He said, "We are not supporting doing any vaccine passports in the state of Florida." He went on to say, "No one was more aggressive about getting vaccines out." Okay, all right, so he supports the rollout, but he says, "We always said we want to provide it for all, but mandate it for none." Okay, so first of all, I disagree with an aggressive rollout of any drug, but we see here the key point is provide it for all, but mandate it for none. Not deplatforming politicians, okay, standing up for free speech, essentially allowing private citizens to make their own choices regarding their health care and regarding what drugs they choose to put in or not put into their bodies. Okay, is that fair enough? Now, on a fundamental level, I disagree with corporations like Pfizer for many reasons, mostly in relation to their history of corporate corruption and criminal behavior. In saying that though, should somebody be allowed to take a provisionally approved vaccine? I think they should be allowed to. I think it should be a free choice. If they choose to have it, then they should have it. And whatever consequences result, it's on them, right? We're all adults and we should be responsible for making our own decisions. And this is what irks me about the government. The government is trying to take the role of, I don't know what you would say, as parents in a way, trying to dictate to us what we should do, how we should take care of ourselves, etc. We are smart enough to take care of ourselves. We don't need the government making decisions for us, especially considering the fact that our government and governments around the world have shut down debates for these crucial topics in relation to public health, right? Remember the doctor's letter signed by hundreds of doctors sent to Daniel Andrews basically pleading for a debate to discuss the so-called merits of the lockdown, completely ignored, shut down as if we're living in a communist country. I like these words. Mandate for none. Provide for all, I'm not crazy about, but mandate for none, I like that. He said COVID-19 vaccines will not be mandated in Florida. Okay, so no vaccine passport and no mandates. Adding that it is completely unacceptable for private entities or the federal government to impose requirements that people show proof of vaccination to participate in normal society. He said, you want to go to the movies? Should you have to show that? No. You want to go to a game? Should you have to show that? No. You want to go to a theme park? No. We don't support any of that, the governor said. Okay, so the governor, I would say, is doing the right thing by the people of Florida. So good on him. There he is. There's the governor standing up for people's individual liberties and their capability to make decisions for themselves. More news from Florida. Florida Education Commissioner tells schools to drop mask mandates because they, quote, serve no remaining good. Okay, so more interesting news from Florida. Florida governor, and this was actually from last year, so he was actually really ahead of all this, extends ban on cities imposing mask mandate penalties. Okay, so really from the beginning, this governor said that he was against the restrictions and he was in favor of people making their own decisions in relation to their own health. Okay, so that is the news from Florida. What do you think about the new legislation? What do you think about the approach of the governor? I think there's so much going on in Florida that Australian politicians should look at and learn from, and so much that should be implemented into Australian society. What are your thoughts? Put your thoughts in the comments. All right. Now, moving on here to some Chinese Communist Party news, more specifically in relation to trade with Australia. Let's open this up right here. So this is an article from the South China Morning Post. China's imports of US coal, Canadian barley continue to climb amid ban on Australian exports. All right, so you've got to understand that since China unleashed this assault on Australian industries, they've found other customers. China was able to replace our coal, able to replace barley, able to replace wine, dairy, beef, what have you, okay? The only one commodity they cannot replace is iron ore, and that's because there's no other country in the world that is capable of producing the quantity of iron ore we produce, nor the quality, okay? And there's no other proven reserves anywhere near that of the reserves in Australia, despite the conjecture spewed about reserves in Africa by the Chinese Communist Party. But anyway, I'm going to show you this article because it's a very interesting read. Again, mcjreport.com. Put your email address in on the homepage. I'll send it to you. US coal exports to China more than doubled between February and March. Okay, so the US there picking up the void of Australian coal. Moving Beijing closer to meeting US-China trade deal obligations. Okay, so under Trump, they made some trade negotiations, the United States and China, and part of the negotiations included China purchasing a certain dollar value of American goods or commodities, and China is looking to make that up through purchasing US coal. It says here, Canada has also gained from China-Australia trade tensions, with barley exports to China more than doubling during the current harvest season. So, of course, China unleashed an attack on our barley industry, hurt many people in the Australian barley sector, and is now buying barley from Canada instead. The Canadian government, Justin Trudeau, probably jumping for joy, saying, yay, China is happy with us. All right, so there's a picture of a coal mine right there. I'm going to read to you some paragraphs from the article, and then we're going to talk about it using some graphs. It says here, while only representing a fraction of Australia's pre-ban coal exports to China, the US sold about 663,000 tonnes of coal in March, more than double its exports in February, the latest Chinese customs data showed. Okay, so US ramping up those exports. It says here, Canada has also been another beneficiary of China's ban on Australian exports. From the start of the crop year in August to February this year, Canadian barley exports to China from licensed grain processors rose by 2.2 million tonnes, more than doubling the previous harvest between August 2019 and July 2020, according to data from the Canadian Grain Commission. At the same time, the value of Australia's unmilled barley exports to China dropped slightly from $500 million in 2019, that's Australian dollars, to about $500 million between January and November 2020. Says here, with December data not yet provided by the country's Statistics Bureau, China imposed anti-dumping duties of 80.5% on Australian barley last May. Anti-dumping duties as in import duties of 80.5%. So the claim China made in regards to Australian barley was essentially that we were exporting barley and selling it to Chinese barley buyers at costs below the going market rate in Australia. So that's the claim China was making. They accused us of price manipulation in regards to the price of which we were selling barley wholesale in bulk to China, and accused us of undermining the Chinese barley market and attempting to essentially destroy their market by undercutting producers over in China. And they essentially have accused us of market manipulation and the devaluing of the barley market over in China. Now, just like any other claims espoused by the Chinese Communist Party, there is no substantial evidence to prove that we in Australia have been engaging in anti-dumping, what China has accused us of. But what we do know is that since last year, when the ScoMo government called for an inquiry into the origins of COVID, China immediately lashed out by attacking several of our industries. It started with beef, it moved on to wine, it moved on to cheese, and of course it moved on to barley, resulting in the implementation of this 80.5% so-called anti-dumping duty, which they're able to impose arbitrarily without providing any real evidence whatsoever to the World Trade Organization. Now, the pushback from Australia is that this accusation is unfounded and needs to be proved beyond reasonable doubt in accordance to rules with the World Trade Organization, which does not explicitly, I guess outlaw is not probably the correct term, but the general rules within the World Trade Organization does not discriminate against dumping. It's just generally agreed upon that nations engaging in trade will not engage in dumping, and it's something that of course is frowned down upon because it has the potential to completely devalue and undermine markets and to completely destroy local competition. That's why it's looked down upon. But of course, how this affects Australia is that arbitrarily and without providing any real information or conducting an investigation of substance, China is able to, on a whim, basically the click of a finger, even though they'll say they conducted a very in-depth investigation, that means nothing coming from the Chinese Communist Party. They've been able to completely destroy this industry. Now, is this the fault of China, or is it the fault of Australian politicians who for decades now have been implementing trade policies that has resulted on such a tremendous dependence of our exports into the Chinese market, the Chinese consumer market? Whose fault is it? Is it China's fault, or is it the fault of the Australian politicians for signing these trade deals, which I argue have put into jeopardy our economy, our national security, and placed our national revenue largely in the hands of an authoritarian regime? I say the blame rests on our governments and the succession of politicians who have engaged in this type of policy. If I was ever working in Parliament, this would be probably my biggest agenda, trying to untangle this tremendous mess which has been imposed upon us from decades worth of politicians who I argue strongly have routinely acted in their best interests, the best interests of the corporations and the multinationals, whilst completely spitting on and disregarding the small to medium-sized businesses of Australia and the regular working people of our country. It's a huge, huge issue, and how would I describe it? Complete and utter betrayal. It's just complete betrayal. But you know what, ladies and gentlemen? We've been sleeping for a long time, right? Come election time, most Australians figure, well, you vote for the red team or you vote for the blue team. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe we've been kept ignorant on purpose. I believe this is very, very intentional, the lack of interest that Australians have in public affairs. There is a cultural reason why so many Australians are more interested in sports than they are, say, national security, trade security, securing our strategic manufacturing supply chain, etc. We look at pop culture, we look at what's taught in school. But ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you, and I believe this from the bottom of my heart, that regardless of where we are right now, regardless of the compromised position our politicians have put us in, and regardless of our former lack of interest in Australian public affairs, Australia can get back on track. Australia is worth fighting for, and we can do it together. Okay, I'll never give up on this country. I know that the fighting spirit of our nation is still alive, and it's been woken up in so many people, and more people every day are showing their fighting spirit, and I absolutely love it. I love that about us. I know that we've got such great fight in us, and we're in for one absolute hell of a fight. So these are not just words, there's plans, there's measures, there's strategic planning sessions that we're engaged in, myself, Monica, and we have tremendous advisors behind us, really incredible people. And guess what? You're going to be a part of it as well. You're going to be a part of this, and it's going to be the biggest fight of our lives. And if you want to be involved, of course, go to reignitedemocracyaustralia.com.au and you can pop your details in. Or you can go to mcjreport.com, put your details in there, and you'll be hearing from me as well. So look at this, ladies and gentlemen, 80.5% on a whim, without even proving it. We're going to punish you and slap an 80.5% duty on. Anyway, says here, China, I'm going to get back to it. Okay, that was a little rant. China has substituted Australian barley with grains from Canada. Okay, good for Justin Trudeau and other sources. Australia has also managed to find new buyers for its product, including Saudi Arabia, the second largest importer of barley for animal feed after China and Mexico, where it's used to make beer. Okay, so this is what we should have been doing a long time ago, ladies and gentlemen. You understand that putting all of our export eggs in one Chinese Communist Party basket is a bad idea. It's a very lazy approach, and it's been the primary go-to approach of our government for too long. When it comes to exports, we should seek a diverse range of export destinations, okay? When the vast majority of exports from a certain industry are dependent on one market, that is a clear sign for alarm and a clear sign that our politicians need to get off their backsides and start a new line of diplomacy, communication with other commerce departments around the world to start sorting out different export destinations. Is that only common sense? Why is it that we understand it, but the people in Canberra don't seem to understand this notion? Or at least some do, but a lot of them don't. Okay, I'd say most of them don't. All right, what else do we have here? There was something else I wanted to show you in this article. Let's see. Okay, this is a breakdown. China's 80.5% tariff comprises of anti-dumping duty of 73.6% and a levy of 6.9%, rendering Australian barley exports uncompetitive in China after the duties were imposed. Okay, so that was the point of it, to destroy the industry. Okay, it says here, last week marked the 1-year anniversary of ongoing trade tensions between China and Australia, which started with Canberra's call for the inquiry into the origins of COVID, and have led to Beijing targeting a number of Australian exports, including beef, wine, lobsters and coal, iron ore notably missing there. In March, China also placed anti-dumping duties between 116.2% and 218.4% on Australian wines in containers of 2 litres or less after concluding its anti-dumping investigations. It's almost painful for me to read this. Okay, you can probably see on my face, I'm actually pained by this. Anti-dumping duties of over 200%. Now, here's the thing about Australian wine in China. First of all, Chinese people in China that can afford the luxuries in life, like wine, and there's a huge population of middle and upper class people in China now, They love Australian wine, and Australian wine is probably their favourite in China for its quality, and I think it's fair to say we produce the best wine in the world. Now, Australian wine is not known for being cheap in China, so the suggestion that we're exporting Australian wine at costs below that of which Australian wine is sold at wholesale in the Australian market in Australia, I say is completely groundless and based on nothing more than China's concerted effort to attack our economy and to attack our country. Is that fair enough? Does that make sense? So, considering that Australian wine is not cheap in China, how is China able to make these accusations? I'll tell you what does take place in China. Stolen intellectual property of Australian winemakers. That's right. Have you guys seen the knockoff of Penfolds? They call it Benfolds. That's right. It's not Penfolds, it's Benfolds in China, and it's a knockoff of Penfolds. It's ridiculous. Okay, Australian exports of wine have almost completely dried up. Now, okay, so this is what happens when you put all of your eggs in one Chinese communist basket. I feel horrible for the Australian wine producers. I also feel this needed to happen in order for ScoMo and his team to start looking for various alternative export destinations. But it also makes me very frustrated that this is even a problem. This should never have been allowed to happen, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so let's see. The slump in China was too steep to compensate for increased shipments from Australia to Britain, Germany, New Zealand. Yeah, so we're selling more wine to other countries now, but it's not nearly enough to make up for the void left by China. Now, where's the attack on iron ore, ladies and gentlemen? Why is China not pursuing anti-dumping measures on Australian iron ore? Why is China not holding up Australian iron ore shipping vessels in Chinese waters like they did to our coal vessels? Why are they not imposing tariffs? Okay, the reason for that is that without Australian iron ore, China stops. Despite the big talk from the Chinese Communist Party and despite their threat that they'll replace us with Africa, you need to understand this is conjecture and the claims are unfounded. Okay, I have not seen a respected publication anywhere that gives credence to the supposed reserves that China is referring to. We know that China has Belt and Road Initiative projects all over Africa, and you have to think that ultimately they want to find a way to extract resources out of Africa and to essentially bleed the continent dry. But we haven't seen any proof beyond reasonable doubt that they can actually do it yet. Okay, it's one thing for the Chinese Communist Party to say that they're going to not purchase our iron ore and instead buy from Africa, but it's another thing to implement the infrastructure. You know, there's environmental factors in terms of whether or not the iron ore can be extracted. We don't know what sort of quality it really is over there, what the iron content is, whether it will even be usable in nature, because you need to remember when the iron content is lower than 60%, essentially the iron ore is useless. Okay, so I see a lot of threats, but not a lot of substance, as always, from the Chinese Communist Party. Okay, now I want to show you something here, ladies and gentlemen. This is coming from the Observatory of Economic Complexity. Now, we're looking at coal, okay? So some people at home, you might be asking yourself the question, why is it that China can stop purchasing our coal, yet not stop purchasing our iron ore? Why is China able to find other customers for their coal, but not able to find other customers for their iron ore? Okay, so first of all, China is a big-time producer of coal, the biggest producer of coal in the world. So China relies on coal imports a lot less than they do other resources. Okay, I'm showing you on the chart here, it's such a small figure in terms of the percentage, what coal makes up in terms of a percentage of total Chinese imports. It's so low, you can't even see it on the chart displayed. So here it is. If you can see it on your screen there, it makes up 1.2%, okay, of the total value of imports. This is from 2019. Now, also from 2019, Australia was a source of 49.4% of coal imports for China. Seems like a lot, right? Seems like a lot, but the difference being there's many other producers in the world that China can substitute us for. And as we see now, China is now importing coal from the United States and has many other coal suppliers on hand. May not be the same quality as Australian coal, may not be as clean as our coal, but China doesn't care because China just needs that extra amount of coal in order to keep their energy moving forward. All right, so to put that in perspective, why China cares way less about coal than iron ore, that's because they can, in terms of their imports from Australia, that's because they can replace us and because they produce a huge amount of it themselves. All right, this is coming from NS Energy. Again, mcjreport.com. Go there, put your email address in. I'll send you the information. It says here, profiling the 6 largest coal-producing countries around the world. Here we go. Number 1 position, China. 3.7 billion tons. And if we want to find Australia, we need to go all the way down to number 5, 550 million tons. So China holding a huge advantage in terms of coal. Okay, we look to the far west region of East Turkestan, rich in resources. One of the reasons why China is holding on to that Uyghur minority region so strongly. So this tells you right here essentially why China does not care about Australian coal. It's because we're replaceable, because they've already got it. Look at this. Only makes up 1.2% of their resources. Yeah, they bought 50% from us in the past, but they have plenty of other options, so it just doesn't matter. Now, let's compare that in contrast to iron ore. Okay, iron ore making up a much more significant portion of China's total annual imports. Again, the data is from 2019. This is from the Observatory of Economic Complexity. We have iron ore imports 5.2%. Now, the destination of imports, Australia making up 66.4% of iron ore imports for China in 2019. So 66.4, of course, being much higher than 50%. But more importantly, we see here that we in Australia are the number 1 iron ore producer. Okay, China relies heavily on other nations for iron ore, especially us in Australia. We also have the greatest reserves of usable iron ore. So simply put, China cannot replace us because there is no other supplier that can supply China with the iron ore in the volume and the quality that we can here in Australia. All right, that's why all the tough talk about Africa, it's all words. Okay, maybe someday in the future there will be some mines discovered and uncovered that could replace us, but we still have time to work in regards to limiting the expansion of China by cutting off their supply of steel. That's right. I'm just going to go out and say it. I'm going to say these things because there's so many people in Canberra that don't have the guts to address this sort of issue. This issue that was addressed by the workers in New South Wales in regards to steel exports to Japan, the same issue we're faced with today, and you need to be talking about it at home as well. My firm belief is that if we don't change the course of history, the iron ore that we ship to China today will someday come back in the form of bullets. You need to understand, China is imperialist, it's expansionist, it's an authoritarian regime that was built on slave labor, torture, human rights abuses, predatory trade practices, intellectual property theft, and they're spreading their governance, their form of authoritarianism all around the world, and they're doing so with an iron fist. Now, any authoritarian state that seeks to expand needs 2 things, 2 very important things: land and resources. All right, China, you got 1.5 billion people, and that's a lot of people, folks. Australia, we've got only 25 million people, a massive country. Australia's massive. We live in one of the least densely populated countries on the face of the earth. China would love to have all of that land so that their cities would not have to be so densely populated. Second reason why nations go to war, especially expansionist nations, resources. Here in Australia, we have the most diverse range of untapped resources probably anywhere in the world. Iron ore, uranium, rare earth elements, nickel, copper, gold. We have absolutely everything. Natural gas, and that's a key, a necessary ingredient should the Chinese Communist Party be able to fulfill its global ambitions of dominance. Okay, that's why they need our iron ore. That's why we need to stop selling our iron ore to China. All right, so top 5 iron ore producing countries: Australia number 1, Brazil. China comes in number 3, but compare it 350 million tons as opposed to us 930 million tons. And Brazil's been a little bit out of action. They had some issues with their coal mines. So there you go. That I just wanted to show you why iron ore and coal are two very, very different kettles of fish. Anyway, heading back to the show here, and we've been going a little bit longer than usual. So let me just find out if you're still there with me. Okay, let's see. We've got Ching, Daz, Margaret, Griffin. We've got a bit of a long show tonight. We've been going for about an hour and a half. I think we're going to break a record for the MCJ Report. I'm sure that Zach would be very happy if if you're out there somewhere. Great guy, Zach. I was on his show running from comfort. I like him a lot. There's Beth, Daz, Daniel, Tracy. I hope that you guys are enjoying the show tonight. I hope it's all making sense. Is it all making sense? I want to make sure that everything is very clear and in a format. And what I want is for a national conversation regarding the merits of ceasing the exportation of iron ore to China, right? China has a consumer market of 1.5 billion people. It's a small central government. They've got too much power. Not one government should have control over 1.5 billion people, whereby the government has the capability to essentially shut down the lights on any economy. I mean, how silly are we, not us, but maybe our politicians? We've had every industry attacked, bombarded by the Chinese Communist Party since calling for the origins of COVID. Yet we just keep sending them steals. Hey, China, build more Navy ships, expand your military, keep building militarized islands in the South China Sea, keep building concentration camps where you torture prisoners of conscience. Just don't stop buying our iron ore. And you've got the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, not even addressing the national security risk posed by the grand-scale exportation of iron ore to China, instead making statements like, oh, I'm sure that China will keep buying from us. Now, I'm paraphrasing here, but that's essentially what Josh Frydenberg implied. Now, China is showing that they're arbitrarily willing to impose these duties on our products. Barley, 80.5%, wine, up to 212%. Arbitrarily say, no, we don't want these products anymore. We're going to slap these duties on, and Australian producers can get stuffed. So what does the Scott Morrison government do last November? It signs the biggest multilateral free trade agreement the world has ever seen, called the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, with China as the principal trading partner of the agreement. How does that make sense? The Liberal Party, we care about national security, we care about the safety of Australians, try to pass themselves off as conservatives that care about national security, yet won't even address the national security risk of exporting iron ore to China and what that means for the global security, nor will they address the potential challenges, problems, and traps which could very well be unleashed upon Australian producers through this new multilateral free trade agreement. It makes no sense. Oh, look at us. We care about you. We ripped up the Belt and Road Initiative, but we're not going to say anything about iron ore. Oh, and we're going to sign the biggest multilateral free trade agreement the world's ever seen with the most authoritarian and torturous regime the world's ever seen. But we care about your safety. Yeah, thanks, Liberal Party. Yeah, we really appreciate it. It's so disingenuous and so deceptive. It needs to be called out, and we'll keep calling it out. And what can I say? It's what motivates me to keep going. Anyway, what else do we have here? There was something else I wanted to talk to you about real quickly before we get to some Q&A. And that is this, ladies and gentlemen. So Monica and myself, we are going to Sydney next month on the 15th. We'll be speaking at the Worldwide Rally for Freedom in Sydney. So anyone from Sydney, please come down. From Melbourne, obviously there's going to be one in Melbourne as well. Now, some people ask me, how come I'm speaking in Sydney and not speaking in Melbourne? So it wasn't my choice. I'm not an organizer of these events. The people in Melbourne basically decided they wanted different people to speak. The people in Sydney, the organizers, they reached out and asked if Monica and myself would like to speak. And of course, we graciously accepted. So maybe some Melburnians thought that I'm leaving you behind. I'm not. I love Melbourne. I was born here. I live here. I love this city. I dare say I'll die here. It wasn't my decision. It's just The organisers, as I said, in Melbourne, they wanted other people to speak. And in Sydney, they invited Monica and myself to speak. So, of course, we accepted. So, just wanted to clear that up for anyone who might be thinking that I'm running off. I'm not. Love Melbourne. It's my home. Love Victoria. So, the Worldwide Rally for Freedom will be on the 15th of next month. Okay. Anyway, just a few other bits and pieces. If you'd like to support the show, MCJ Report, I want to take this show to a new level. Of course, we're also doing tremendous work. Monica and I, Reignite Democracy Australia, behind the scenes. We have a great plan in place, and you are going to be a part of it. But in regards to MCJ Report and getting this news out there, the other perspective I like to say on the MCJ Report, we talk about the other side of the story that is otherwise ignored by the mainstream media. Now, I do this full time. It's only made possible with your financial contributions, and I'm proud. I'm proud to be paid by you. I'm proud that MCJ Report is not funded by the corporations and that it doesn't rely on corporate sponsorships or anything like that. I'm paid by the public now, so I'm responsible to you, and I'm not beholden to any sort of corporate influences or anything like that. If you'd like to support, it's mcjreport.com/support. You can support from as little as $5, and supporters I add to a private Telegram chat room where we send ideas back and forth. We even have some meetups where we get together at local pubs and we have a bit of a chat and we do things. And that's mcjreport.com/support. In saying that, if you're going through a difficult time financially, please hold off for another day because I'd prefer that you look after yourself first. If you'd like to get involved in becoming part of the solution, it could be letterbox drops, it could be propping up a good, decent person in your area come next election. Get in touch, reignitedemocracyaustralia.com.au and go down to where it says become a volunteer today. Get involved today. Go and click on that button right there and you can fill out a form regarding how you'd like to be involved. So what we're doing right now, Monica and I, is we're going everywhere. We're meeting with volunteer groups. We're bringing printed information for people to do letterbox drops, massive placards for people that are willing to stand on street corners, holding up signs that are in defense of our liberties, signs that are designed to counter the narrative of the government and the mainstream media. And considering censorship online is a huge issue, we realized we needed to go old school. We need to print things. We have great supporters in the printing industry that print at cost price, and we're getting thousands of flyers printed. So if you'd like to become part of these sessions and do your bit, you can head over to Reignite Democracy Australia and fill in the Become a Volunteer page, fill out your details, and we'll come and do an event. We did Ballarat, which was the first proper information session that we've done, which was very fitting actually, being the birthplace of Australian rebellion. But we're going to go everywhere, and I want you to be a part of it. All right. Anyway, who has some questions? Does anyone have questions? Sasha says, come to Dandenong. We'll be around. Tracy says, MCJ Report t-shirts. Would you wear an MCJ Report t-shirt? What about an MCJ Report coffee mug? I figure we talk about news and stuff, and maybe some of you watch the MCJ Report and maybe you drink coffee or tea, and maybe that would be an interesting thing. It could be good. On my set, you see I've just got random coffee mugs here. And we see some YouTube comments. If anyone has questions, please ask me questions now. I'm here to answer your questions. Daniel says, would I be interested in interviewing Chris Chappell from China Uncensored? I'd love to, but the question is, it's a very popular show. I'm sure they receive messages every day. If someone can get in touch with Chris Chappell for me, then absolutely I'd love to have him on the show. And there's my friend there, Anthony, is recommending MCJ underwear. Hey, it could be a big hit, right? MCJ underwear made in Australia. Teresa says, come to Brisbane. We will. Darren says a coffee mug would be fantastic. T-shirts, key rings. Oh, it's actually been on my mind to make some merchandise for MCJ Report. You know, and so if you guys would like me to do that, obviously I would greatly appreciate it. It's a way of supporting the show, supporting my work. This is all I want to do in life. All I want to do is fight against this very unfair situation. I love Australia and I believe in our fighting spirit, and And this isn't something that just popped up. I've been wanting to run my own show since 2015. In 2015, I decided I wanted to have my own broadcast, but I knew that I needed to learn more. I needed to improve my vocabulary. I needed to become more savvy on foreign affairs and domestic affairs. So I held off because I didn't want to be some guy making videos that didn't know what I was talking about. And here we are. Joe says, still no updates on Dan. Mate, your guess is as good as mine. I don't believe anything that comes out of the man's mouth. Okay, bumper stickers, we could do that. Remember we had the Andrews Must Go bumper stickers? Okay, so what we need to find, Frank, in relation to export destinations is the government needs to identify foreign markets which are in need of iron ore. Now we see booming populations in West Asia, parts of Africa. Populations are rising around the world due to industrialization. So with industrialization comes the greater need for, obviously, steel. Now, what would I love to see in Australia? I would love to see us ramp up our processing of iron ore into steel. You know, very often we send iron ore to China and we buy it back from them in the form of degraded steel. We should be doing that here in Australia. Who agrees with that? Joe says you think Daniel Andrews has been told to shut up. Is that what you reckon? You reckon the Labor Party said, oh, this guy's just going to cause us problems. He's too hated. He's going to ruin our election chances. Let's just keep him away from the cameras. It's a plausible theory. I don't know for sure, right? I'm just going to read some comments. Who's got some comments? Am I going to do podcasts? Yes, Lisa. It's so high up on my list of things to do. I guess it's just a matter of extracting the audio and uploading it. So I'm going to get onto that, Lisa. Thank you for reminding me because I do want to do that. Daz says you reckon Andrews is in Gitmo. Okay. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. That's funny. Someone made a funny comment about a product that I should sell. Just reading some comments. Beth says, can we get a t-shirt with "We Are Coming" on the front and you can say no on the back? It's a good idea. Let's see. Tracy says, when you're ready to travel to Swan Hill. That'd be very nice. Thank you, Tracy. I've been to Swan Hill, you know that. I went there in my early 20s to buy a car, out of all places. So I have been up that way before. Swan Hill's near Mildura, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? Or am I getting my geography mixed up? They were from Swan Hill. I met them in Mildura. It was like a very shady transaction in a car park, but it was for a vehicle. Can we target? Well, here's the thing. You guys can protest anywhere you want. Okay, so we're going to be doing these information sessions, Monica and I, under Reignite Democracy, and we're going to be giving out information that you can put in letterboxes and also the placards. Now, once you have the placard, this is your personal property. It's yours. You can do what you want with it. You can stand on a street corner. You can stand in public. That's nothing more than exercising your right to free speech, and you're holding a personal possession. It's not illegal, all right? If the police ask you to move on and threaten to arrest you, hey, you can just move to another street corner. I'm not saying I agree with the police doing that to us, but I understand that not everybody wants to get into a confrontation with police and end up taking them to court. So there's ways that we can move around this. You know what I mean? Between Mildura and Bendigo. Okay, so I think that I've gotten my wires a little bit crossed in relation to where exactly Swan Hill is. Okay, I think I'm thinking of a different place. Swan Hill. I'm thinking of north of Mildura. Is there... Okay, I think I've crossed my wires. Anyway. Can you get a poster that you can put on your roller door? Okay. That's an interesting request. I suppose it would have to be some pretty durable material if it's to be sort of... if it's to not be destroyed when you put your roller door down and up. So... if you can find that type of material, we can certainly send you the artwork and you can go and print it. Oh, you did, Terry? I'll have to check it out. Anna says, come to Japan. I'd love to. You know, Japan is one of those countries that I've never visited, but I always wanted to go there. I'm fascinated by Japanese society. I like their culture. I like the respectful nature of Japanese people and the food and the landscapes. I'd love to go without a vaccine passport. Is that fair enough? All right, if anyone has any questions, speak now or hold your peace until Wednesday. Something else I want to talk about is the MCJ report. I'm thinking to change the schedule to, instead of Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'd like to do it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You know what I've noticed on Friday? I think that Friday is a time, and I say this because maybe I don't understand the average social life that people have. I think Friday after work is a time when people want to get together a lot of the time, hang out, have dinner. I'm not sure that doing a show Friday night, 8 p.m. is the best time to do it. So I'm thinking Monday to Thursday could be a good schedule for the MCJ report and ditch the Friday show and to actually expand to 4 days a week instead of 3. What do you think? Put your thoughts in the comments. Anna says you've been living there most of your life. Just reading some comments here. 1.75 hours. That's a record. We've been going for 1 hour and 45 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, congratulations. This is a record for the MCJ report. Zach from Running from Comfort would be very happy, I'm sure. And thank you for being part of it. All right, I think that's just about it now. I think that's just about it. Randall says Japanese martial arts. Absolutely. Japanese martial arts have been very influential on Australian society. Absolutely brilliant. Okay. All right, guys. Lots of love. I want to thank everyone for being here. Colleen says scrap Friday. I think I agree with you. And that's it. So we're going to be doing more, researching more, and I'll catch you on the next broadcast. Catch you soon, ladies and gentlemen. Be safe. God bless you. God bless our country.